So thank you so much, Dr. Butler, for joining us today. Super excited to talk to you, especially about this topic that I feel like therapist to therapist, right? You hear that a lot about people getting comfortable with talking about mental health, where we still have
Absolutely.
that barrier where we're still kind of dealing with it. I think we're breaking it. Definitely social media is helping us kind of chop down at it, which is really, really good. We're seeing more
Mhm.
people going to therapy, more people opening up about mental health than ever before, celebrities and things like that. But I think we're
Absolutely.
still dealing with it. There's still some people that are like, well, it's not for me. And
Right.
it's just not my thing. But so I
Yeah.
think this is a good topic. But before we go into it, let people know who you are, what you do, and where you're located.
Of course, of course. So I am Dr. Butler, Dr. Tanisha Butler. So I am a assistant professor at Ramapo College where I teach social work courses. So where I teach, futures, clinicians, and other kinds of other kinds of social workers, because all social workers don't have to be clinicians, and also psychotherapists. So I own a small private practice in New Jersey, but I also see clients virtually from Virginia because I am licensed in both New Jersey and Virginia. Because I'm originally from DC, I just moved to New Jersey like 2 years ago, so I am still holding on to my to my DC a little bit there. And so they can find me. I have a website, TamishaButler.com, and also I post on Instagram, sometimes Twitter. I'm not as good on Twitter. At It's Dr. Mish. So that's where they can find me.
Awesome. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
We are, like I said, I know we're still dealing with some of the stigma about mental health. Where do you
Mhm.
think that even comes from in your expertise and kind of even what you've seen as being a therapist and in the school system and different things like that, where you're learning or teaching a lot of your students about how kind of deal with people dealing with an array of issues. Where do you think
Yeah.
that comes from?
I think that, although we are doing a little better in regards to the stigma around therapy and like people getting therapy, I still think that it has left like this bad taste in our mouths, right? Like it's like the aftertaste. And so many people are moving forward, but I think that a lot of people are still embarrassed by the process of like talking to someone about the things that they may be experiencing. And I also think that there's still this big misconception that therapy is needed for people who are struggling or there's something wrong, right? Now, yes, it's helpful for those people as well, but therapy is also another avenue for you to kind of like sort through your personal thoughts, and it doesn't have to be a significant challenge. You don't have to be clinically depressed. You don't have to have clinical levels of anxiety. Like sometimes you just need another person there. And so I think that people still think that people go to therapists when something is wrong. I was talking to someone the other day and they were talking about how someone might need therapy. And I was like, well, have you asked them? And they said, well, I don't need, they said, the person said they didn't need it and that they were good. Right. And so, but you could still see that there's some elements there of some things that they still need to deal with. And so I think that people just feel like therapy, is for people where something is wrong or have significant challenges. And then I also think that sometimes people are embarrassed by some of the things that they might need to talk about. And for me, it's like I've heard all kinds of things under the sun, right? From working in this elementary school system to working with high school students to being a professor. So I would often encourage people to understand, like, I can almost promise you that something that you're dealing with, your therapist or therapists around the world have heard it before. Like you're not alone in your challenge, you're not alone in your thoughts. And so I just think that, people get, embarrassed in that kind of way. And then I think there's also this other element to it where sometimes just people seek out other avenues where they really should be coming to therapy. So I've heard people say, well, I exercise and I journal by myself and I go to the spa or I go to church, and all of those things are 100% amazing. But there is no feedback, right? There's no instant feedback from those things to kind of help you with your thoughts. So those are kind of some of the things I think that's still happening.
Yeah. Do you think those things of journaling, exercising, going to church, do you think those are good coping skills, techniques, tools that people should
Absolutely.
utilize?
Absolutely. I feel like, I am an advocate in people when I do therapy, right? When I have clients and we're walking through coping skills and strategies, I like to start with where people are and what they're comfortable with, right? So if in therapy we're working on this aspect of it and you're getting that instant feedback and instant ways that you can restructure some of your thoughts, I encourage people to still do some of those things that give them an outlet in their homes, because that's how I know it's being reinforced, right? Because other than that, it's just like we're in this session together and then you leave. And I don't know if you're still working on it. So the journaling helps you still work on it, right? Like you being connected to your religion or your spirituality lets me know that you're still working on it. Exercising, right? If you're struggling with motivation, lets me know that you're still working on it. So I think they're amazing coping skills. But I think what happens is that people go to those as their sense of therapy, because they feel like they don't need to see a therapist because they had those things.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, what are some ways that people can work on becoming more comfortable with opening up about whatever they are dealing with? Because that's still a
Yeah.
thing. People are like, I kind of don't want to talk about it. I don't know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that for starters, it's helpful to find a therapist that looks like you, right? A person who you can connect with on a therapeutic level, but then also that a person that can relate to you, right? Because you don't always want to have to explain yourself in therapy, right? Whether it's the words that you're using, whether it's the challenges that you're experiencing, you don't want to have to over explain. And over explaining, I think, can also cause a sense of frustration. And so I think it's helpful to start with finding somebody who looks like you, whether you're a Black woman, whether you're a brown woman, whether you're a Black male. Like, it's helpful to seek out people that you feel like you can relate to and you can be yourself in that space, right? Like, I've had clients sometimes come to me and they say a curse word, they're like, oh my gosh, like, my bad. And so people they really do see therapists as like, I don't know, as like an authoritative figure, I think, in some senses. And so there's like this dynamic where, again, they're not comfortable with being themselves. And so I always say, you can curse, you can talk your regular language that you talk to your friends, because that's where the true healing starts. And so I think first finding a space where you can be yourself, and then starting small, right? Like, you don't have to go to the therapist and throw up everything immediately. You can fill it out, right? Like, finding a therapist is like dating. So the first therapist you may go to may not be the one for you, right? So fill it out, take it easy, but don't get so turned off immediately if it doesn't quite work. So I think that that's a good place to start, just with finding a person and searching. You guys have an awesome platform for that. I had so many people coming to me like, oh my gosh, I saw you here. And this is why I wanted to talk to you. So I think finding a therapist who looks like you and who can relate to you, and then just starting slow, right? Like, starting really, really slow, because you'll do better if you just give yourself time, to just start with some simple things, start with simple things.
Like, can you give me an example of some simple things
Yeah.
that I could possibly start with?
Yeah. So, like, let's say I have a client who comes and this is a client who possibly knows that they're struggling with like major depression, right? Where they've been super sad for the past couple of months. They're not eating well. They're either overeating or not eating at all, not necessarily sleeping. And maybe they don't really want to get to the bottom or the core of what's happened, or if something has happened that has resulted in this. And so instead, it's starting with daily conversations, right? Like, when you go and you sit and it's just like, here's how I'm feeling today. And do you have any tips to kind of help me get out of bed, right? So instead of getting straight into the core and addressing the root of why you're depressed, because maybe you're not comfortable with telling that story yet, you can go to first start to seek some coping skills and some mechanisms to at least help you get one foot in front of the other, right? But this idea that I'm going to go to therapy and like have to just spill everything and talk about my childhood, and I'm not quite ready to do that, but I do know that I want to start the journey. You can start the journey and just let your therapist know, like, I'm here to start, but I'm not quite ready to get to some of the things that I know I possibly have to get to at some point.
I love that. That is so
Yeah.
good. Okay, but let's say I am not ready for a therapist. I think that where I am, jumping to a therapist is super too much
Mm-hmm.
for me right now.
Yeah.
And maybe I am working on opening up to someone else, maybe that I'm close to.
Yeah.
Do you recommend doing the same thing of starting small, or how do you even tell that person, like, I kind of want you to be the person that I confide in? Or is that not something that you even tell them? You just build that relationship?
I think it just goes by building the relationship, right? And I think it's healthy to have a person. Um, but I like to tell people to be careful who your people are, right? Because I think that there's so much healing in venting, right? And just being able to say, like, here's how I'm feeling today. And I just need you to listen and be my person so that I can know that someone else hears me, right? But your person may not be trained enough, right, or at all to be able to give you the kind of feedback or space that you need. For instance, right, we're women, right? And let's say you've been in a relationship, right? And you know that this relationship is kind of like rocky. You're in it, you're not necessarily in it. You know that you really should be progressing and moving outward, right? Your person may be your homegirl or your best friend. And when you're venting to her about your emotions while you're currently in the situation, her go to may just be, well, why don't you leave? Right? Like, why don't you just bounce? And that may not be helpful for where you are in this moment, because your best friend is only doing what they need to do to help keep you safe, right? Mentally and emotionally, but you're not quite ready to take that step yet, right? And so that kind of information wouldn't be helpful to you. So it's like, it's okay to have a person. And I 100% advocate for having a person. Like, I have a therapist and a person, right? And so when I go to my person, it's just like, okay, here's what I just need you to listen. I don't need your opinions right now. I just need you to listen to what I got to say. And if I do need an opinion, I'll say to my person, can you tell me what you think about this? And did I approach this in a healthy way? And even that, again, I know who to ask if I approached it in a healthy way and who not to ask. I have friends they're gonna ride for me regardless, right? Right, wrong, and indifferent. But I do have my best friend who will say, she calls me me. She'd be like, Mish, I think that you could have done this in a different kind of way or said that in a different kind of way. So she's my person, and she's capable of receiving and giving healthy feedback, right? So I think it's 100% fine to like build a relationship with someone you can trust, to vent to. Just be careful of how much you're putting on that person
Yeah, that's
and
good.
what you're expecting.
Even better, I think the expectation part is a big one. That's a really big one. I think, like you said, just even checking our expectations, because sometimes you might get mad at that person and say, well, you didn't do for me what I would do for you. Well,
Mm-hmm.
checking our
Mm-hmm.
expectations is super important. That's where a lot of our issues do come in at, though, our expectations.
I say it all the time. I'm like, we get standards and expectations like all confused, right? Like, everybody wants love and trust and connection and friendship, right? Like, that's kind of like the standards
Right.
of life because we're humans. But how they look, that's where expectations come into play. How you love, how you build, how you connect with people, how you vent, how you respond. Those are all based on like personal experiences and personal expectations. And so my idea of love and friendship and connection may be different from yours. We both want it, but what it looks like, it's like it can change. And it's like we do such a disservice to ourselves when we have like, I expect for you to be me. Like, there's no possible way. There's no way.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't have said that better. Okay, I think that's a good one. I think we talked about this kind of briefly a little bit, but just to kind of reiterate that, what are we saying to the people who are like, I just still don't feel comfortable with that? I feel like I can deal with it on my own. Like I don't need any help and I can deal with it by myself. Like the things that I'm going for or I'm going through, I can deal with it by myself. How
Yeah.
is that silence affecting someone like through
Yeah.
over time?
Yeah. I would first say to that person, like, I understand, right? Like, I understand the amount of discomfort it may take to have to talk to someone, right? But there's so much growth in being uncomfortable, right? But the disservice that you do to yourself when you say I got it is we don't realize when we say I got it, it's just us and us, right? Like it's just you and you in your brain. So when you're thinking, you're responding to you. So if you're thinking in emotions, you're going to be responding in emotions. And so you're going to react based on your emotions because it's just you in your head, right? And so the biggest disservice that people do when they say I got it and I can do it and I can sort through this on my own is that they don't give themselves the opportunity to see it in a new light, right? In a fresh perspective, in a way that's possibly based in logic, right? Like still being able to feel, but being able to have a space where they can see and receive things differently. But when it's just you and you, right? Like if you're angry and you're thinking in anger, you're going to respond in anger until you learn how to not do that, right? Which you possibly won't learn how to do until you go and like seek a licensed professional, or if you want to start small, someone that you know can have your best interest at heart and will give you honest and true feedback.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good because
Yeah.
I have some family members that are like that are like, yeah, no, I yeah, I hear what people have going on and I
Yeah.
applaud them for doing it. But no, I've learned how to deal with stuff on my own. And I'm like,
Yeah.
have you?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Like I've been on the receiving end of some of those things, and I don't think so. I don't think so, right? But it's just like if you were angry, right? Like if somebody really upset you, and you know how like some people are good at calming down with not saying something, right? But me, I'm the type of person if I'm really upset and it's just me and me, I get madder if I don't speak because when I don't speak, I don't give the other person the opportunity to say, I didn't mean to do that, right? Or I didn't mean to say that to you, or can we look at it this way? But when it's just me and me, like as soon as I try to convince myself that it's okay, I'm back mad again, like, nah, it's not okay. Like I never, but that's because I'm in my head, right? And a lot of times people are in their heads. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have confidence in yourself to be able to sort it through because you can gain that confidence at some point. But if you've never truly done the work, right, and put in the effort to understand how to do that, it's a hard thing to do. I'm a licensed professional, right? Like I said, I've had a therapist and it's still difficult for me, you know?
Same.
Yeah.
I don't care. Some of my friends may be like, well, you're a therapist. Listen, don't do that. Okay. I'm a human. I'm
Absolutely.
also a human and I deal with the same struggles that you guys deal
Absolutely.
with.
Absolutely. And my cup is empty by at the end of the day,
Yeah.
like my cup is empty. One of my like a therapist told me one time, she said, like, you have compassion fatigue. Like you just because you're sorting through everybody else's things all day long, my
Yeah.
students and their things, right? And then when it comes to me, she's like, I don't want to have to think,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just want to react. I don't want to have to respond. I want to react. So yeah, it's always helpful to just have an outlet, right? And it's again, it's okay that you trust yourself that much, but it's not healthy, you know.
How important is it, do you think, for a therapist to have a therapist?
Very, very, very important and like top of the list. Top of the list. And again, strongly because of that compassion fatigue piece, right? Like I remember talking to my therapist about just, how do I find the balance in between pouring all day, right? Like from my well into somebody else's cup all day long, right? Whether it was teaching or whether it was in session. And so when it came to me in my personal life and my family and my partner, my fiance, it was just kind of like everybody should just get it, right? Like people should just get what I need because who is going to be that for me? And my therapist had to remind me, like, everybody's not a therapist, right? So these people in your spaces, aren't going to be able to do what you need them to do and what you're expecting them to do because they're not trained to do that, right? So that goes back to having a person. I have my best friend, but then the therapist is 100% necessary because I have my personal things that I go through too. And sometimes I don't see it clearly.
Mm-hmm. What are your suggestions on someone that, kind of like how you said before, you see someone and you think that therapy would definitely be beneficial for them because they're struggling with something? How do they approach that? That's a really, thin line to walk. How does
Yeah.
someone approach someone else that think they might need help, but
Yeah.
may not want it? They may not want the help.
That's tricky. And it's tricky because if it's not done right, people sometimes use it as a weapon to weaponize something. And so, what I mean by that is, I might throw that out in the middle of an argument, right? Or in the middle of you being frustrated, like you really need to see a therapist. And now I'm weaponizing something that I may know is very, very true, but it's not healthy. So I think the first thing is like to check the type of relationship that you have with that person. So if you have a relationship where honesty is expected, right? And honesty is in the midst of your relationship. I don't see anything wrong with saying, have you ever considered, right, a therapist or someone that you can talk to kind of like help you sort through some of the things that you're dealing with, right? Like you never tell somebody, I think you need therapy, right? Because first of all, if you don't do this as a therapist, and you certainly don't do it as a person who's not trained, because who are you to tell somebody, I think you need therapy, right? So saying it in a more palatable way is just like, have you ever considered giving this some thought? Because it might be helpful to you, right?
Right.
So I think if you have that kind of relationship where honesty is at the foundation, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're just at your cookout, your family cookout, and your cousin acting a fool, that's not the time to be like, you need a therapist, right? Like that's not, we don't do that. We don't, because again, a message is not a message unless it's received, right? Like if it's just words you're saying to a person and that person doesn't receive it, then it's no longer a message. So if you're using that to say you need therapy and the person doesn't hear you, then the message is void at that point, right? But when somebody is able to take what you said and receive it in a healthy way, then what you said has met its purpose, right? And so when you package it different, you're not using it out of anger to weaponize something. I think that there's nothing wrong with telling someone that this might be something that you think is helpful for them.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I love that what you said. A message is not a message if it's not received.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
so true. Any tips for someone who has been selected as a go-to person? So I'm noticing that people are coming to me and I've been selected as their person to
Yeah.
talk about some stuff. How do I deal with that? Because maybe I do want to help them, like you
Mhm.
said, but I might not be in the space to help someone, or I don't want to push them away. I don't want to say the wrong things. And I'm not a
Yeah.
professional. I'm not trained on how to handle this. So I don't want to tell them, well, girl, just do this, or you just need to blah, blah, blah. How do I
Yeah.
handle that if I've been selected to be that person?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is to always ask what somebody wants from you in that moment, right? Ask them, like, do you want me to just listen? Do you want comfort in the forms of like agreement? And like, what is it that you want from me in this exact moment? And if it's an opinion, I can give you my opinion, but are you in the space to receive my opinion, right? And not feel attacked by it. But I think always asking, like, if you're the go to person, making sure that you ask what people want from you in that exact moment, right? Don't assume, don't guess, because I can tell you most of the times people are not calling for your opinion. They're just calling to, even if they say, what do you think? They don't care,
Mhm.
right? They do not care about what you think. They just want to be heard and to be seen. So I think first asking someone, like, what is it that you want from me in this exact moment? Like, how can I service you? And I think also making sure that you practice boundaries, because becoming everybody's person is heavy. It's a heavy load to carry. And so making sure that you practice boundaries, that you're not always if this is a person who you know, it's always something, because everybody has that person, right? Where it's always something. It's they're going through a season right now where like everything is a blow up. Then pick and choose when you pick up the phone, right? When you're in the space to be able to be what they need you to be. Because picking up the phone every single time is not helping, and it's further enabling them, right? To just whenever they feel the need to just throw up on people that they can. Again, nothing wrong with venting, but like the consistent need to throw up on people without any clinical refocus is not healthy. And so, as the person, you don't want to consistently reinforce that behavior. So, pick and choose when you pick up the phone. Ask what that person wants from you in that moment. And if it's your opinion, you cannot get upset or frustrated and or mad when that person doesn't listen to your opinion. Because, like I said, honestly, most of the times, even when people say they want it in those moments, they really don't. They just want to be heard.
Yeah, I agree. This has been such a good topic and such a good
Yeah,
conversation. I feel like you've given so many jewels throughout this, where people in many different stages in this has
absolutely.
something that they can take from it. But let people know who you are again and how they
Yeah.
can find you, and if they fell in love with you and they're like, oh, I want to work with her.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Dr. Tanisha Butler, I am physically located in New Jersey, but I run a private practice, virtual private practice right now because of COVID in New Jersey, and I also have clients in Virginia because I'm licensed clinical social worker in both states. And I'm also assistant professor at Emerald College, New Jersey, where I teach new and up and coming social workers and clinicians, and I love it there. And you can find me at tanishabutler.com and also like on Instagram and Twitter at It's Dr. Niche.
Love it. Thank you
Yeah.
again so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And all of the work that you guys do. I cannot tell you how many times I get messages like, oh my gosh, I found you on Black Female Therapist. And I'm like, okay, it's working. I love it. So yes, you guys are doing such great work. And I really, really appreciate you guys as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.